Amen.
Good morning. How are you guys doing? Whoa, nice. Nice. Hey, if you don't have a Bible, raise your hand and the ushers will get you one. This summer, we spent the whole 9 weeks in Isaiah 61, and today we'll be concluding that. But there's been a number of people, like the ushers, the greeters, the parking team, people who have helped out in our youth ministries, in our children's ministries, people who have helped in the info booth. And just thank you so much, because you've helped make this summer not miss a beat. So thank you. Yeah. All right, if you have a Bible, let's begin. Isaiah chapter 61. Page 689. We'll start in verse 1. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me, or Messiahed me, to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now, anytime I read a text, I want to know why it was written. Why did this author feel the need to write this down or to say it? Another question I love to ask is, what did the original audience hear when they first read this or when they first heard it? And last, how is this text so revolutionary? How did it actually change the culture? And so today I want to look at this first verse in Isaiah 61. If you go back to the Torah, which is the first 5 books in the Scriptures, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, these 5 books were huge for the Hebrew people. Not only did it tell the story of the Israelite community, but it also gave the Hebrew people ways to live in harmony with God. The Torah was known as the way, the truth, and the life. And within it, there were 613 mitzvot, 613 sacred deeds or commandments for the Hebrew people to live in harmony with God. Now, what ended up happening is the elders in the Israelite community, the teachers, the rabbis, what they started to do was to rank these mitzvot, these sacred deeds, these commandments, from 1 all the way down to 613. And all agreed on the first and greatest commandment. Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your being, your essence, everything that makes you, you. But the second commandment, that's where it started to get a little fuzzy. Some tension. There was a minority of elders and teachers who believed that the second greatest commandment was to love your neighbor as yourself. But the majority believed that the second greatest commandment was this. Leviticus 19:2. Be holy as God is holy. Be holy as God is holy. Now what's fascinating is at first glance, this verse is beautiful. But the way that the Israelite community defined holiness really changes this verse. I think for many of us, we were taught that holiness meant to be set apart. It meant dealing with issues of purity, cleanliness. And this comes out of the Hebrew community. They actually set up sharp social boundaries that centered around the idea of holiness was about being clean, about being pure, about being holy. And so if you were dirty, if you had an infectious disease, you were no longer considered holy. You were considered unholy, considered impure. You wouldn't be able to enter the temple. You wouldn't be able to worship Yahweh. You were asked to leave, sometimes even the city. And this verse set up the way the culture for the Hebrew people was set. Be holy as God is holy. One writer, next slide, says this. The purity system was to create a world with sharp social boundaries between pure and impure, righteous and sinner, whole and not whole, male and female, rich and poor, Jew and Gentile. Now, the righteous, those were people who oriented their lives around the purity system, the purity laws. Those who chose not to were considered outlaws, considered impure, unclean, considered sinners. Sinners. Those who were physically not whole, whether they were blind or had some physical ailment, they were considered not whole as well. Females weren't considered whole in some way. The poor and the Gentiles. And this whole culture was set up separating yourselves, either to be clean or those who were unclean. And they oriented their life around protection and fear of getting close to any of those untouchables, getting close to any of those sinners, any of those people who were different or dirty or impure. This was the way the culture was during the days of Jesus. Turn with me to Luke 4. This is Jesus' first message. He's just gotten back from healing some people. Rolls into his hometown. We'll start in verse 16. It says this. He went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And on the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began by saying to them, "Today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Now, the synagogue, they understand the purity laws. This is something that most of the people were living by. And all of a sudden, this hometown teacher, this rabbi, gets up, is handed the Isaiah passage, and begins to read of it. And begins to talk about the kind of ministry, the kind of way that he's going to be ushering in. He's beginning to tell them what the kingdom of God is going to look like. And it's not one that's separating himself from the rest of the world. It's one that's going out to the poor. It's one that is going out to the prisoners. It's one that's going out to the blind. It's one that hears the cries of the oppressed and goes and is with them. This is the message of Jesus. And the people listen to him, and their eyes are fastened on him. And he says, Today this is fulfilled. Today this is fulfilled in your hearing. Today this is what I am going to be about. I have come to overturn this system of purity, the way that this culture has been set up, and I have come to show you the best life possible. I've come to show you that we cannot set up our communities being exclusive and dividing ourselves and setting ourselves apart from everyone else. I have come to show you that my ministry is about being inclusive, about unity, and about living the ways of Yahweh here, now, and it starts today. This is what Jesus did. Now, imagine the purity laws. If you followed the purity laws, you were considered righteous. If you chose not to, you were considered a sinner. It makes me think about Mother Teresa, this elderly woman in Calcutta. going out and serving people who have leprosy, the poor, the people who don't have anything to eat, the blind, and she's with them. In the realm of the purity laws, would she be considered righteous or a sinner? Sinner. How about Jesus? Righteous or sinner? Sinner. How about you? Would your life be considered righteous the way that you're living right now in the realm of the purity laws? Or would you be considered a sinner? Let me take this farther. Look at this next slide. Be compassionate as God is compassionate. Luke 6:36. Now what's fascinating about this verse is the word compassion in Hebrew and Aramaic is actually the plural word, the plural form of the word womb. Compassion is the plural form of the word womb. And so here Jesus is speaking. He says, be compassionate as God is compassionate. But the people listening would have heard something else. They would have heard that God is like a womb. They would have heard that God is like a womb. And that we, as followers, must care for everything that has come from the womb of God. Be honest, the environment, this creation that we live in, matters because it's come from the womb of God. The people who are crying out, the poor, the blind, the prisoners, the oppressed, to Jesus, they've all come from the womb of God. And so they matter. And He orients His life to go and to feel and to be with them. That's why for me, I live on the southeast side. And do you know that 50% of the incoming ninth graders who attend Grand Rapids Public Schools on the southeast side don't ever make it to 12th grade? They drop out. It's a big deal. I think that matters to God. Because God is like a womb. You think about a womb, it's nourishing, it's life-giving, it's protecting what's within it. And Jesus is calling His followers not to be holy, not to be set apart, not to be righteous, but to go and actually be womb-like. Or a word that I like, next slide, wombish. Wombish. It's kind of got a little flair to it. And there's my question. Are you wombish? The life that you live, do you care? Compassionate? Does your heart break? Are you moved to hear the cries of those in need? And as I was putting together this summer, I thought that it would be really cool if we could invite a guest to come here. See, I work with junior high students, and each month we have a theme for the month. And towards the end of the month, we do like a late night talk show, sort of a la like Conan. And we bring in a guest who's living out the theme. Because I want my junior high students to understand that the scriptures aren't dead. That people are actually crazy enough to actually try and live them out today, here in this world. And today, we're going to do that. We're going to have someone come who I believe is wombish. Someone who actually, in my opinion, incarnates Isaiah 61 in beautiful ways. This man has been on a little bit of a speaking tour, has spoken to over 400,000 people this summer. This man is a modern-day abolitionist. Big word, I know. And this man has potentially a new book coming out in the next few months. This man is inspiring to me, and he's a true friend. So will you guys give a huge Mars Hill welcome to my friend Zach Hunter. Oh, and by the way, he's 14. 14. He started a campaign called Loose Change to Loosen Chains. And his whole mission is to end slavery throughout the world. And he's doing it. So, no more me talking. Oh, wow. I don't know if they were clapping for you or for me just to shut up. So Zach, you're from the hot Atlanta.
Yep.
Tell us about Atlanta.
It's pretty hot. Yeah. I have pretty much a normal family: a mom, a dad, a little brother, a dog, and I love music. So
beautiful. Well, hey, this whole church we've been talking about joining the God of the oppressed, justice issues. To you, teach us, what is justice to Zach Hunter?
Justice is righting a wrong committed against somebody. It can be fairly simple, but most often it's not.
Wow.
And it's different from mercy too. Mercy is like clothing the naked or feeding the hungry. Justice is more like freeing someone from slavery.
Wow. Now, who inspires you? How did you? 14 years old. Who inspired you to do this?
There's this man named William Wilberforce, and he was an abolitionist 200 years ago. And he actually succeeded in abolishing the slave trade in the UK. And him and his friend John Newton, who was his mentor.
Wow.
And I'll just give you his story. He wrote, the movie is called Amazing Grace, named after the hymn that John Newton wrote.
Now, real quick, you're working in regards to this new movie.
Yeah, there's a campaign coming out along with it called The Amazing Change. And I'm the global youth spokesperson for it. So I've been going out and speaking at music festivals and stuff about this.
You have the trailer to this movie. Does it come out February 27th?
Yes, I think so. Next February.
Well, can you kind of just explain it before?
Yeah. It's about William Wilberforce's life, and it shows his entire struggle. He had a really, really bad illness that he struggled with his entire life. And he still battled slavery all through it. And you might see John Newton in here. And he's the older gentleman who mentored William Wilberforce. But he wrote the song Amazing Grace out of his guilt because he was a slave trader. When he was young, his ship had been rerouted. His father was a slave trader. And his ship had been rerouted to Africa. So he actually became a slave to an African princess there. And he was actually stoned while he was a slave. And a really terrible situation for him. He escaped, made his way back to England, and then he became a slave trader too. And he became a Christian one night on a stormy sea. But he still kept trading slaves for 12 years until he came to grips with the fact that it was wrong, and he wrote this.
So the song we sang, Amazing Grace, the guy who wrote it was a slave trader.
Yeah.
After he became a Christian,
yeah,
realized what he had done, and writes the song.
Yep.
Wow. Well, we'll watch the trailer, and we'll continue our interview. Zach, you've oriented your life trying to abolish slavery throughout the world. Can you tell us what slavery looks like today?
Yeah. I brought something with me, actually. I can show you. I actually have a pair of shackles right here. These are the kind of shackles that are used on modern-day slaves. Probably about a 5-year-old boy who'd be rolling cigarettes all day long. He'd sit on the floor like this and just be rolling cigarettes all day long with these on his feet. If he doesn't make enough of them in a day, then he's beaten. And, it's not just like sweatshop labor or anything,
So these are on their feet, and if they don't make enough cigarettes, then this kid's beaten.
Yeah, on their feet, so they can't run away.
Like this happened 200 years ago?
Yeah, it happened 200 years ago, and it happens now, too.
Wow.
Most of us think we've had a bad day, but how many of us have had a bad day? Just raise your hand. Go ahead. Yeah, that's most of us, I think. Okay. For a bad day for a teenager like me, it might be that we got a really bad grade in math. I'm not saying I do or anything, but if we're adults, then it might be that somebody cut you off in traffic. Yeah, and it might be that your kid's disobeying or something. But a bad day for a slave is when they get beaten Or, little girls are kidnapped and put into brothels and abused multiple times a day. There are child soldiers that are forced to kill their friends. Do any of us have to do that? Any hands? No. Yeah, that's the situation for a slave. Every day they do this.
Are you really 14?
Yeah.
Okay. Seriously?
Last time I checked.
Do you know, or can you tell us a story about someone that you've helped rescue out of slavery?
Yeah, actually, there's this guy named Rakesh. If you could put his picture up here. Yeah. This is your neighbor, because God says to love your neighbor. And to me, my neighbor is anybody who's in need. This is your neighbor, Rakesh. And he was a rug loom slave, weaving rugs all day long. And the reason why they enslave children for this is because they can weave the little intricate designs that they want. And, he got into debt. He got into slavery because his parents were in debt. And the slave owner just charged interest, really high interest, for Rakesh to work for him. So the debt just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if Rakesh showed up late, you can go to the next slide. If Rakesh showed up late or made a mistake on a rug, he was beaten with this. And this is what they used to separate the threads out with, this iron claw right here. It's just terrible, But this is what they did. And a partner of ours for my campaign called Free the Slaves, they came in and they got all the parents together to face down the slave owners. And they got all these kids out. And they also built a school. You can go to the next slide. And they built this school, this little thatched school. And Rakesh has assumed a leadership position in the school. He's actually the head of the disciplinary committee or something like that. But really, he says you were beaten then. You don't want to go back to that. So take advantage of this opportunity that you have. And if somebody misbehaves in class, he brings them up to the front of the class and makes them apologize to whoever they did something to. So a really good tactic. And these are the faces of slavery. And you can go to the next slide. These are the faces of slavery too. And it's just terrible that somebody would enslave these people. And it's only because they're cowards, The only reason why slave owners would enslave little children or those who are weaker is because they're cowards, And, that's why we need to do something about this.
And you chose to do something through the campaign you started called Loose Change to Loosen Chains. Tell us about that.
All right. 2 years ago when I was 12.
2 years ago when you were 12?
Yeah.
I was playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Sorry.
That's okay. He's random. But 2 years ago when I was 12, I was in the car driving home from school. And my mom had just gotten a job with this organization called IJM, International Justice Mission. So you might have heard of Gary Haugen. I think he came here and spoke a while ago. But he, my mom was working for IJM, and I asked her what the organization did, and she said that they freed slaves, And I didn't know that there were still slaves in the world, It was just a crazy idea to me, because it was Black History Month, and I was learning about slavery in our own country. And I had always thought, if I lived back then, I would have been in the Underground Railroad or something, I would have been doing something about this problem. And when I found out about this, I just felt like I had to do something. People ask me why I care, and I can't answer because it's just part of me. God's given me this passion for justice. And, so my mom helped me out a little bit, and she and I together launched this campaign called Loosen Chains. And, we raised $10,000 through my church and my school, and we gave it to IJM. And now we're expanding to other organizations too that we're helping, like Free the Slaves, Rugmark, JFCI, Justice for Children International. And they're all doing amazing work. So that's for my story.
Wow. This question, it's like setting him up just to go off. What do you think God feels about slavery?
All right, can you pull that slide up for me? Isaiah 1:17.
Have you done this before?
Yes. Well, not like this, not with all these people, but Isaiah 1:17. Learn to do right, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, and plead for the widow. That's really straightforward there. It doesn't get much more basic than that. But The people who are abused are the orphans and the widows. They're oppressed. It's because they're the weakest people. A widow doesn't have anybody to take care of her, and neither does an orphan. So, this, people sometimes, I just hear these really ridiculous arguments. Oh, Jesus didn't really care about slavery. He might have condoned it even. I've heard like that argument. That's ridiculous. Just look at this. Isaiah 1:17, learn to do right, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, and plead for the widow. So you can't really argue with that.
It's time for a little Montel moment. We do this in junior high, but if you have a question, I would love to come find you, and you can ask my friend Zach. Is there a question? Oh, right there. I see that hand. All right.
How did you get so smart?
How did you get so good smart?
The good looks were genetic, and the smarts were too. So
I called him about 6 months ago, and he's like, Steve, dude, I just got done finishing this book on Harriet Tubman. You know who Harriet Tubman was? Yeah, I think. Starts asking me these questions. I'm like, dude, knock it off, bro. All right, another question. Anyone else got a question? Uh-oh, I see that hand. Does he have a wife? Oh. Sorry. Do you have a website?
Actually, there was no minimum marrying age in Georgia for the past 6 months. But yeah, anyway, no, I do not. I do not have a website yet. If you go onto Google and type in my name, Z-A-C-H, Hunter, it will actually pop up a page that's on IJM's website that shows Loose Change, Loosen Chains, and the stuff that I've been doing.
But you have a MySpace, right? MySpace.com /LC2LC.
Yep.
Yes, I'm a fan. I'm a friend. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question. Tell me about the spiritual component of this movement in justice for you.
It's kind of like the whole thing is spiritual, because without God, none of this would be able to be happening, And, I'll make a little analogy here. You know how if you want to get really close to somebody, that you do something that they like, like if your friend likes snowboarding, you go out and snowboard with him. And so that you have the shared experience, and so that you can talk about it with everybody else afterwards. Well, God loves justice. And if you can seek justice along with Him, you'll have a shared experience. And by shared experiences, you get closer. So.
Next question. Another question. You have kind of gone about this with, the little cups, the loose change. I've heard that there's like $200,000 of like just coins in people's like couches and vacuums and cars.
Nice guess, but it's actually $10.5 billion.
$10 million.
Billion.
$10 billion?
$10.5 billion.
10.5. Did I stutter? Change in people's cars, people's vacuums.
Yeah, houses everywhere. $10.5 billion in American households. What's kind of interesting and kind of embarrassing, we're not an incredibly rich family. We found $200 worth of loose change in our house, It's just crazy. There's a lot more there than you think there is, really.
And you've started this whole campaign going at the youth. I mean, not trying to go big business. Like, you've actually gone out with these little cups. Tell us about why you chose to do that.
Because, I think my generation is the justice generation, that we can get this done. Because, we have the energy and the passion. And we think we're invincible. That's why guys my age do things on skateboards that they really shouldn't. Because we think we're invincible. And that's why my campaign is student-led. And sometimes adults are wet blankets on our campaign, but not all the time. Because we need each other, because students are resource poor, adults are resource rich. Students have the energy, adults can keep the thing on the ground so that we don't go crazy. So it's sort of a symbiotic relationship. I don't know if you know what that means, but yeah.
You're right, I don't.
Okay, symbiosis is...
The act of symbi?
No. Symbiosis is where there's a mutually beneficial relationship. You need me to break that down more, or is that good?
No, it's...
Okay.
Maybe for those people. No,
People over here. Okay.
No. Zach, the one question that I would love for you to answer. You know, we're a community, and we're trying to figure out what it means to join the God of the oppressed. Bro, you're doing it, man. Like, you inspire me. You're not just a friend, but you're someone I look up to. You are wombish. And, yeah. Full circle. Full circle. But will you just take a moment to stand? Just teach us what it means to join the God of the oppressed. Just speak a word into our...
Well, being wombish, my interpretation is sort of, like you said, being womb-like or compassionate. But, a womb is the place of ultimate security. Nothing can harm you there, basically. And, you're provided with everything that you need. And the person who's providing the care for you has to give a part of themselves in order for you to survive, And that's sort of why I think we need to be wombish, because we need to provide a piece of ourselves. We need to give a piece of ourselves, provide this safe environment for slaves around the world. And God is the ultimate womb, I guess, He's incredibly compassionate for all of us. He didn't say that it's too far to come from there down to here to save us pitiful humans. So we shouldn't care that they're across the ocean. We should care about them too. We should expand our circle of compassion to be this big, to be God-sized. And it can't be God-sized without God's help,
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming here from the hot Atlanta and teaching us what it means.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
Everyone, Zach Hunter. Yeah, you're awesome. I thought of no better way to close the service than to have Troy come up and lead us in Amazing Grace. And then I'll have two quick announcements after the song. If you came prepared to give an offering, there are joy boxes in the back. Zach Hunter, thank you so much. And the start of the Isaiah 61 series, at the end of the teaching on July 2nd, I held up a sign that said, Donde, where? Where are God's friends? And as I put together this series, the word where just kept coming up and up and up to me. Last week I shared with you out of Genesis 3 a question that God asks as He seeks us out, and He says, where are you? The next chapter, God approaches Cain and He says, where is your brother? Those two questions, where are you and where are your brother, to rabbis set the whole precedent for the whole biblical story. And so as a benediction, my brothers and sisters of Mars Hill, may you have the courage to answer both those questions. May you leave today inspired by this 14-year-old to go out and know that